Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. This is NFA Live. We have two very special guests. As always, we have Rob from Digital Asset News up in the upper left, and Guy from Coin Bureau down at the bottom. Just as a reminder, if you are not subscribed to either of them, make sure you subscribe. I believe both of you are in London now. Is that right?
One of us is.
One of
I'm
us
on
is.
my way. That's why I
Okay.
might have to take off a little early. So I'll be there in like 13 hours.
Okay. All right. And Guy, I
I'm
guess.
already I'm already here though, Ben. I'm just outside London, but yeah, just far enough away from London for the internet connection to be ever so slightly janky. So
Right.
let's see.
Right. So today I thought we could talk about, I mean, I have four questions that I wanted to go through. There's not a whole lot going on in the cryptoverse right now, but I think we can find a few things to talk about. One of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit is now that we're in June, one of the things that Rob has said for the first half of the year is he kept saying there was this thing, this voice inside his head, like sell and make and go away. And I kind of want to follow up on that. Um, the other, of course, we need to talk about what's going on with the SEC, and they're continuing to really go after the cryptocurrency industry. We have Binance and Coinbase all in the same, basically 2 days back to back, getting sued by the SEC, and I mean it just seems like it's going to likely continue. I mean there's other exchanges that are probably going to be receiving a notice soon as well, for all we know. And so we want to talk about a little bit about that. Rob, you made a tweet about something that you talk about constantly. I think people are getting kind of annoyed, but about the Bitcoin dominance. And yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's like I think people know what your opinion is, but you keep saying. So I'm curious because you said something about if it can't go higher from here, then what would really make it? So I want to follow up with that and see if you still have those convictions as always that the dominance is going higher, or if you've changed your views. Um,
Absolutely.
and then the other thing is Guy. I know you've been a little bit more optimistic about the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation than I have, and I think so far your optimism has been was right. I mean, it has continued to do pretty well. I think the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation right now is right around 0.07. It's funny if you look at like a 50-week moving average of Ether's Bitcoin valuation, it's basically just like sideways at like 0.07 for months. Because we don't go anywhere. We go below it, we go above it, but in the end, nothing's really changed for the last couple of years. So those are the main things that we want to talk about today, and then we'll leave it open to some audience questions at the end as well. So, Rob, first question. We'll start with you on this because you've been talking about this for a long time, right? Like the
Yeah.
sell and man go
Yeah.
away, and you said it. I think you said it as early as probably February or something, maybe even earlier than that. I don't know. But you mentioned just like I keep thinking, right, like maybe sell and man go away. So far, right? So far, it seems like most cryptocurrencies are down from where they were at any point in May. So I'd like to know if you could give us some follow up to that narrative that has seemed to play out, and what your view is for the summer.
Yeah, it's a great thing. Like, and we would, we'd always talk about this. Sell a man, go away, sell a man, go away. And then you would reaccumulate in October, November and get right back into the cycle, into the markets. So I did a video on this in end of April, early May, and we talked about it. And it was an article from Barron's or Reuters or one of those two, and it talked about how like just because we talk about sell a man, go away, it doesn't mean that that happens every single year. And it went through and talked about statistically like how most of the time you would do that, but in some instances you wouldn't. And one of those was during the midterm elections, during the time of a presidential election, and then some other factors it took a look at. And then what we took a look at was that, and also just where we were in the actual cycle. So when we took a look at it, the video, and I talked about it, I go, there's this voice in my head. And sometimes you really should listen to your gut. Let's be honest. We really should listen to our gut. Like we're like, maybe this meme coin, I shouldn't sell my house and buy everything, or maybe I shouldn't, go into all these. there's something in you that is intuition that will tell you to do it. The sell and then go away was in my head for months. And when I look at this data, I'm like, okay, it says that we shouldn't sell. I'll sell just a little bit, but not much at all. And I'll just keep accumulating and off you go. One thing so even though I talked about it, I didn't follow through because the intuition failed. I failed myself, in all honesty. And I don't know if it's going to actually pan out that way. But I will say this, there was one thing that I took a look at, which was, I don't know where things are going because there's so uncertainty, especially regulation. And now, of course, this week we've, fallen down a hole. Now I'm looking at it, I'm like, it's a good thing that I, put more things into Bitcoin and didn't YOLO into some crazy altcoin and number 500, because I think those are going to get hurt a lot. So even though, we talk about it, even the data that I took a look at, even if I did do it, I couldn't take credit for it because, in all honesty, who knew this was coming? I mean, on this particular date.
Was the data you looked at, what is it, for crypto or was it for stocks?
It was, well, it was two, because we took a look at the midterm elections, the presidential election, the time between those periods. And then we took a look at, of course, the 4-year cycles and where things were. So I took a look at it, I go, in all honesty, it's always the same thing, right? 2016, 2012, we have a Bitcoin halving, then an all-time high, then a dip and a reset, 4. Usually in these reset years, 2023, 2019, 2015, it's a good time to actually accumulate towards the end of the year. Mm-hmm. So I just said, well, I'll just keep doing that and not sell too much, then go from there. So, but we know that it's not like it's a perfect correlation between the crypto and the stock markets, but that's what we looked at.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, I know you did suggest that it was something to at least consider. I mean, at this point, it seems like a pretty good play, right? I mean, that's not to say that things can't recover, right? I mean, I think at some point they will. I mean, I think at some point a lot of things will recover. It's just in the short term, it does seem to have been a worthwhile strategy.
What is Bitcoin at today, as opposed to like back 4 months?
Yeah, I mean, so right now it's at like 26,400. But I believe in May, I said the lowest price that Bitcoin was in May was what, 25,823. That was like the absolute lowest price it was at in May. But I only think it was at that price for like 1 day or something. So it's at the lower end of the range that it was at in May. But that's Bitcoin, Rob. I mean, there's a lot of and Ethereum has been doing somewhat well, but there's some altcoins that have been putting in new lows recently. They've actually taken out their December lows is some of them, and some of them are not that far away. So Bitcoin and Ethereum are doing a lot better, but the altcoin market is really, I mean, they're stuck in traffic on struggle street right now. So I don't really know, I mean, how they're going to get out of it, but I think that's kind of where we are. Guy, what is your view? I mean, I know, I mean, I don't think you necessarily said sell and man go away, but I know you've been sort of sounding, you've been somewhat worried, especially about, the altcoin market, and we've talked about the economy slowing down. Well, what's your view right now of what's going on in the market and kind of what your outlook is for the summer?
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of bearish really the last few months. So, I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I saw everything that's happened over the last few days coming. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but I didn't. I certainly had no inkling it would come so quickly. But anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. But I mean, in terms of the next few weeks and months, I just can't really see it doing anything other than kind of chopping sideways. I don't think there's going to be. Well, first of all, I just don't see many people buying, and I don't see many people selling either. I mean, we've seen plenty of charts, I think, over the last couple of weeks. Exchange balances are low, probably lower now, given everything that's happened in the past few days. And then there's all this talk of liquidity being sucked out of the system by the Treasury as it refills the TGA. So I can't really see a scenario where lots of people are buying, but I don't really see an awful lot of selling either. I think the market is just kind of, people are just content to kind of sit there and wait out this storm. Now it depends how long this particular storm is going to last. I think it could be quite a while yet. So when you combine that, a general sort of lack of liquidity with fairly low sentiment, and I guess you call it a kind of hodler's mentality, what does that translate into? For me, I think, yeah, just pretty much sideways price action for the next few months at least. And yeah, I mean, it does vindicate what Rob said about sell in May and go away. And I guess anyone who, I mean, I didn't do that. I stuck to my strategy of doing as little as possible, absolutely nothing, which,
Right.
you know, has at least kept it away and went away is probably feeling a lot easier about this current situation than anyone else. But yeah, I think what with liquidity conditions, and of course we've got a Fed meeting next week. I think the Bank of Canada and perhaps the Bank of Australia have both hiked again. The last time I looked at the CME forecasts, it was 66 to 33%, thinking that we might possibly see a rate hike. So although I don't think I don't personally think the Fed will hike again next week, but I don't think we can rule it out either.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the bond market has been all over the place with their expectations, but normally when we're this close to a meeting, I think normally the higher probability option does tend to be the one that plays out, right? So because the market thinks that they're not going to hike at this close to the meeting, normally what the bond market thinks at this point is correct, I believe. So I'm probably with you on that. The other thing that we should discuss is, and I mean, this is probably where we need to spend most of our time today, is what's going on with the SEC and Binance and Coinbase, because I mean, look, centralized exchanges are something that we can talk about all day. Obviously, it's not a great idea in general to leave a lot of crypto on centralized exchanges, right? We say all the time, right? Like, not your keys, not your crypto. With that said, we also need to be like aware, where I think we're all aware that a lot of people got onboarded into crypto through these exchanges, and I think the issue is that if there's not places for people to become onboarded, then it's just hard for new money to flow into the space. So I'm curious what your takes on this are. I mean, Guy, I'm also really interested because I know you're not in the United States, and I'm kind of curious, like what the view is from someone who's outside the United States. Is this kind of like it's like it's happening, but it's not really relevant to you because there's still so many options available for you locally, or do you think that there's larger implications for this even for people outside the United States?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think as much as we'd like to think otherwise, whether you're in the United States or not, what happens in the States reflects on the rest of the market, reflects on and will reflect on regulations elsewhere. And that's true, I think, of any market, but I think it's probably particularly pronounced in crypto at the moment. So yeah, this has got implications for everyone, and it's one of the reasons why it's so important that the industry not moves away from the United States, but I think sort of further decentralizes, looks for other other territories, other countries to expand regulation by enforcement. Now that seems to be the order of the day, and I can't see any crypto company in their right mind staying there, and if they have a choice to go elsewhere. So as much as, sorry, I think my internet might be a little wobbly there. But yeah, as much as we'd like to think it, unfortunately, everything going on in the States is gonna impact everywhere else, which makes it all the more important that other places step up. And what I think is particularly important is, there's talk of, obviously Hong Kong's been in the news, or it was before the SEC kind of hijacked the headlines. Hong Kong, obviously Dubai, where I'm based at the moment, even though I'm back here in the UK, which is itself another contender for a possible crypto hub, and then you've got various places in Europe as well. And what I think is really important is that rather than the industry concentrates itself too heavily in any one particular place, it's able to spread itself across these other jurisdictions, because the last thing we want. I mean, it's this doctrine of decentralization, isn't it? If the industry concentrates itself in one place, like it kind of has to an extent in the United States, then it becomes vulnerable. It becomes vulnerable to the whims of the government, of the regulators in that territory. So what I'd like to see over the coming months and years is the industry kind of fan out across the world, and eventually, if you get sensible, well thought out regulations in the United States, gradually parts of the industry can migrate back there. But I think probably this will be the moment where everyone sort of realized it's like, right, okay, we can't all cluster in one place, even if America is where so much of the money comes from, so many of the investors are. The industry has to fan out.
So we shouldn't be as centralized. We should be more decentralized, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Exactly.
Rob, what are your thoughts? I mean, I know you're in the United States. I mean, what's your view on this?
Well, I always thought this was inevitable. We knew that we were going this route. We knew that Gary wasn't going to give up, and we knew that after he messed up with problems with the Celsius, the Voyager, the FTX, and 3 hours, all that stuff that he missed, he was going to come down hard to make up for lost time, and that's okay, because when I take a look at it, at first when I heard about it, I was like, well, I'm surprised it happened right now with Binance. And then I was surprised at how fast it came about with Coinbase, but it was inevitable. And I just thought it was interesting, the timing between them and Hong Kong when it came out and said, you know what, on June 1st, we're going to actually allow these cryptos potentially to be traded. And depending on what they come with, but it looks like, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Polkadot, Solana, Cardano, Avalanche, Polygon, those types of things. So again, when I take a look at it, I know people are like, some people are scared, some people are freaking out, some people are like, this is the end of crypto. No, because remember, it's Gary's job to enforce the rules, not make the rules. And also in all of those filings, remember, out of the 67 ones that were deemed securities, there was no mention of Bitcoin, and there was surprisingly no mention of Ethereum as well. So even if we get stuck here in America to go, well, okay, we got Bitcoin, Ethereum, that's fine. I mean, we'll be okay with that for a bit until they sort it out. And we'll still be able to get some altcoins, but that's where the rest of the world picks it up. And that's why Hong Kong comes in. If it works out pretty well with Hong Kong, I think it'll spread to mainland China, 1.4 billion people. But again, I don't think this is like a death sentence. And we'll talk about Operation Choke Point 2.0 and all those things. But I just look at them like it was inevitable, but we still got Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I think we can still move forward. Not a big deal. Not as big a deal as people make it out to be.
I mean, we talked about regulations coming for the last couple of years. I mean, so it's almost like there's this, I know it's kind of depressing now, but I have to imagine there is another side to this at some point, right? When we come out the other side and we have at least some clarity on things. But I don't know. I mean, some of the things that Gensler said recently, I think he said something around like the idea that we don't need any more digital currencies and that sort of stuff, which to me seems like a really different stance than he took on crypto just a few years ago. So it's disheartening to see someone go from where their views on it in 2019 to then where they are in 2023. And yeah, I think it's a little strange to me, I think, but maybe it shouldn't be. I don't know. Well, I guess the next thing to talk about is Rob's favorite topic. So you put out a tweet recently.
Yes, this is true. Bitcoin dominance. Let's talk about it.
You guys drag me into this discussion constantly.
I'm sorry. I got to talk about it.
Yeah. So you put out a tweet recently talking about the Bitcoin dominance and how if it's not going to go higher now, like what would possibly make it go higher, right? Like, if you have all these altcoins being declared securities by the SEC, it still has to go to trial and everything, right? It's not like they're going to, there's not like a definitive answer on this just yet. But yeah, like what do you think? What do you think's going on right now? Because we had all this stuff. I think the dominance is at 48%. Are you kind of leaning in the direction of if it can't break here, it's not going to? What is your view?
Well, I first heard about this thing called Bitcoin dominance. It was briefly mentioned on this channel, Into the Something Verse. And when he talked about it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Never heard about it again. So I was like, maybe I should take a look into Bitcoin dominance and see where it's going. Remember, in 2016, I mean, you get a Bitcoin dominance of above 70%, something crazy like that. And now, of course, we go into 50. I was under the assumption that maybe altcoins would win out as time moves on. So now when I see that the SEC came out and said these 60 or these 54 different cryptos plus the ones that are mirroring actual stocks, they are the securities. I thought to myself, well, if we are left that in America, and of course, SEC is trying to shut down Binance US and freeze those accounts. If we're left this in America and we have a good amount of liquidity and actual transaction power, and we start to say, what can I get in here without Gary Gensler saying, hey, you can't do that? I would think that Bitcoin, Ethereum would go up. Or excuse me. Well, yeah, actually, I think Bitcoin dominance would go up. Ethereum would still go up a little bit until they decide to do whatever they want to do with that. The rest of the world, and I taught this about in a tweet. I said, the rest of the world, now is your time to pick up that mantle. In the comments section, probably right now, there's people going, who cares about America? I'm not an American. I don't care about America. And that's it. And Guy said it perfectly. You may not be in America, but you have to recognize that there's a lot of purchasing power and a lot of money sloshing around because we print it like crazy. But now it's your time, world, to step up and prove that, hey, we're here. We're going to get into crypto hardcore, or we're going to actually pick it up. You can pick up Bitcoin, Ethereum, but the alts are all right there for you. So this will be an interesting time to see what actually works out. If not, Bitcoin dominance goes up even higher. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, Guy, what's your view? I mean, do you think that do you kind of echo his sentiment of like if it's going to break out, this would be a good time to do so, and if it can't, then that might mean that it actually comes back the other way?
I think this is certainly as good a time as any for Bitcoin to break out and for people in crypto to move there for safety. I think there's two things that I'm curious about. One is kind of Bitcoin dominance excluding stablecoins, because I think the overall stablecoin market cap has been pretty strong and until lately. And obviously, I think that's a big thing to consider. All the liquidity, all the money sloshing around in the likes of USDT and USDC, and of course, that's still a big worry on the horizon, because the SEC's gone after Binance, it's gone after Coinbase. What next? Is it going to go after stablecoins? I think so. That's something we still need to be wary of. So I think it would be interesting. I don't know if you've got that. I don't know if you've got that chart to hand, Ben. Bitcoin dominance excluding
I do.
Stablecoins.
Ben's got that chart.
That's my favorite chart. It's just like right. It's always up there. I just overlaid it on the screen, so people should be able to see it. If I share the screen, it wasn't working last time. So people on YouTube.
Whilst you find that, Ben, I think the other thing to consider is one thing that that if you like the kind of big black swan on the horizon at the moment, or possibly is ETH hasn't been mentioned in either the Binance or the Coinbase suit, and
right.
Much to everyone's relief. But there's still that question mark, isn't there? There's still that uncertainty about whether or not the SEC is kind of cooking something when it comes to Ethereum. I would like to think that no, I'd like to think that is a route that they are not going to go down. But then again, after the last couple of days, when they've chosen to go after two of the biggest players in the industry, that says to me that they're obviously kind of up for a fight. So you can't rule that out. And if that does happen, then that really is Bitcoin. Is when you'll see Bitcoin dominance go absolutely crazy. But I think ETH, especially now that you can unstake it, especially now that institutions should, in theory, feel more comfortable about holding it and staking it, I think that is still an attractive asset for many. And I think that's always going to suck up some of the excess liquidity floating around. And of course, I think it's I saw somewhere that a lot of the alts that have been bleeding lately have been in the wake of the Binance and Coinbase suits, seem to have been bleeding mostly into ETH, I think. So I think that's something to consider.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, what is true for sure is that, I mean, the altcoins are bleeding on their Bitcoin pairs, but they're almost all bleeding on their Ether pairs as well. And then we know that Ethereum's Bitcoin valuation has been going sideways for, a long time. So you're right. I mean, like they have been bleeding on both on both pairs. So it is interesting. By the way, just for I put the chart on the screen for people on YouTube to see, but the dominance excluding stables is now at 52.71%. So it is slightly higher. I saw a Reddit post recently that someone was like the Bitcoin dominance is going to 90%. That I think is something that, if history is any indication, you have to fade that idea, because that's the thing. Like, let's imagine a scenario where Rob is right in terms of, like, we see the dominance break up like he's been calling for right around this time, and if you're muted, Rob, but but if the dominance breaks up, you could see a lot of people call for like 90% dominance, 100% dominance. That typically is where you fade the idea, and then altcoins actually find their real bottoms on their Bitcoin pairs. Um, because one thing that I've found time and time again is there's a phase to be Bitcoin heavy, and then there's a phase to, I wouldn't say be altcoin heavy, because I don't really think there's ever a time that's a great time to be altcoin heavy, but to at least take on more of the risk in the altcoin market tends to come when everyone starts calling for 90% dominance, right? Like, I'm not that bullish on the dominance. I imagine Rob's not that bullish on the dominance, but
Close.
yeah, but close. Like, maybe, yeah, maybe just a little bit less. But one of the things that I think is a good segue is, the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation is, you basically have Bitcoin dominance at 48%, right? It has not been able to break 49% yet. I think that's sort of where the floodgates open. But you also have this other idea that I think Guy has been nailing for quite a long time, and that's the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation, right? Is that it has not dropped yet, right? And I think we could argue that if that were to drop, then the dominance probably would break above that level. But I mean, Guy, maybe you could talk a little bit about Ethereum. So, why do you think specifically it has been holding up stronger? Maybe you could just talk a little bit about that, because I know you've been more optimistic on it, and I think that's been paying off so far.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, again, what I mentioned earlier about everything that's happened since the Shapella upgrade, was that last month or the month before? So obviously, I think ETH is a more attractive asset, especially for big institutional investors. They love yield more than anything else, and they can get good yield at the moment on staking ETH. Now, there's a decent chance that now that they can unstake, of course, that's a double-edged sword, because it makes them feel more comfortable with staking ETH, but it also means that they can unstake it and sell their ETH and take their capital elsewhere for better yields. So there's always that possibility to consider. However, at the moment, ETH staking has been pretty rewarding from a yield point of view. So I think that's one reason. Ethereum is just, its position as the dominant layer one just seems to become more and more taken for granted with every passing day. There is no serious competition, and I think it's telling, actually, and it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, those SEC suits, ADA and Solana, were both mentioned as being considered securities by the SEC. Now, if the SEC goes after those two projects and other alternative layer ones, then that can only be good for Ethereum. And like I say, Ethereum, so far, it hasn't been mentioned as a security, certainly not in these two recent suits, although Gary certainly seems to have some ideas around that. So it's precarious, but at the moment,
it is precarious. Precarious Wi-Fi.
ETH around the lifetime. And then, of course, the recent meme coin craze, that resulted in a heck of a lot of fees on the network, and that obviously resulted in a lot of burning of ETH. And so ETH has become deflationary for the large part, and that makes it a very attractive asset for many. So I think I think Ethereum is getting this reputation, sort of not quite as entrenched as Bitcoin, because obviously, it hasn't been fully confirmed as a commodity like Bitcoin has. But I think after Bitcoin, Ethereum is the next and probably only really safe haven in crypto. But again, as I say, that's the case right now, and I think the big danger is that the SEC decides to go after it. So there are these dark clouds sort of swirling. But at the moment, Ethereum, it's held up really well, and it's kind of proving its worth. And whatever you say about the meme coin craze and stuff, it all happened there, and it was good for Ethereum, like it or not.
Yeah, I mean, it led to a lot more ETH being burned for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, Rob, what's your view on this? I mean, I know we've talked a little bit about Ethereum's Bitcoin valuation before, but are you impressed, or let's say, are you surprised by Ethereum's resilience on its Bitcoin pair? Or were you expecting it? What's kind of your view here?
I think it wouldn't have been so strong if it wasn't for the fact that the SEC did not name it. Now, if the SEC came out and named it, I don't think that would have worked out too well. But I think if you take a look at it, like if you really take a look at it, like Ethereum, since they didn't name it, I thought to myself, well, it'll probably do pretty well, because as American citizens, if I want to get into altcoins and I can't do it on a certain exchange, well, good news, like Ben, or like Guy said, I just use my Ethereum. I use a DeFi protocol, or I use a DEX, and I can get into any alt I really want to. That's the power of Ethereum. I think it's the one thing we talk about a lot. Like you may not know all the alts that are out there, but I will tell you this: a lot of them are built on layer ones, and the biggest layer one right now for building on other cryptos would be Ethereum. So yeah, I look at that, I'm like, nah, that's pretty much par for the course. So it works out pretty well. And then lastly, just real quick, I wanted to mention to everybody that I know these are trying times, and we think like, okay, Gary did it, now we're screwed for the next 2 years, and we're going to be grinding sideways, and it'll be awful. But remember, there's some things that are going out. Just next week, we're supposed to have a congressional hearing, and they're gonna roll in Gary Gensler to ask him a bunch of questions to grill him. Now we know he's not going to answer them like perfectly, because that's Gary. He's also, I believe, a lawyer, and he knows how to get around those things. But also, there was a new bill, digital asset market structure, or the DAMS bill, that was introduced on June 1st. And that's going to give us a lot more regulatory clarity if it pushes forward. It was put forth by the Republicans. Hopefully it'll get passed. It has to go through Congress and Senate. But I mean, there's some things going on in the background that are not so awful. So just remember that just because one thing happens and it's like the only thing that people talk about because it's just so negative, there's a counterbalance for everything that happens that could be positive.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into the last question. But before we get to the last question, guys, if you guys have questions for Rob or Guy, make sure you go ahead and ask those in the comment section so we can go through a few of those. But Rob, one of the last things you said was you're sort of talking about there are other ways of looking at it. And I think that's the biggest issue here, is that there's a lot of people that are they're just over it. They're tired of it. They're tired of the scams. They're tired of the rug pulls. They're tired of the regulation FUD and all this stuff that just goes on and on and on and on. So maybe you could speak to that. I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen this sort of sentiment, and talk about what are the positive, the sort of the more positive way to look at crypto right now.
The positive way is, I mean, we take a look at just on the premise of the legal structure of who's being sued and what's being sued. When I took a look at that, I go, well, okay, at least, Bitcoin Ethereum is out, and then Bitcoin Ethereum dropped like 6-7%. I'm like, that makes no sense. Remember this, everybody, the market is irrational, and that's just how it is. Even though we said it clear as day, it still drops along with it. Then all of a sudden it rallies up, and everyone's like, oh, that's a miracle. It's not a miracle. It's just that everything's irrational. So when I take a look at stuff like that and the different bills that are coming in, I'm not too particularly worried about things in the long term. The short term, it's going to be choppy, but that's just it. Like, how many times have we gone through this? All three of us, excuse me, where we see that there's China's banning Bitcoin, or there's some new regulatory masterpiece coming out, or there's a pandemic, or there's a war in Ukraine, or they stopped money printing and now it's quantitative tightening, and it just goes on and on and on. And before you know it, you're like, well, there's no way this could go up. And then all of a sudden, I mean, where are we? In all honesty, the market's pretty resilient for everything that just happened recently. So to me, when I look at this, I'm like, I don't see this as like the end all be all and the worst thing of all time. And lastly, I will say this: that's not to say that our market didn't screw up. I had Simon Dixon on. He's going to be at the Coin Bureau Live event. Get to meet him, and he said very frankly, he was in since Bitcoin. He was buying Bitcoin at $3. He's been an investor into Coinbase and Ethereum and a host of other small companies. And he said, look, he goes, our industry has messed up. We've effed up here. We've done bad things. We've gotten greedy, and we've been in bed with the wrong partners. And he goes, in all honesty, all the things that happen right now, that it just kind of flushes everything out. And he goes, and these things have to happen for us to build back stronger. So I'm like, that's not a bad way to look at things.
Yeah, I think it's always a good idea to look at it like that. Guy, same outlook. I mean, I know you haven't been as short-term optimistic in terms of price action, but long-term, I imagine you're still very bullish on the crypto industry as a whole.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. This is another bump on the road, and let's remember, as Rob said, there have been so many bumps along the road, and I think that the crypto industry has faced way worse than this, and something I always like to think about at times like this, at times when there's regulatory worries or something going wrong with all that catastrophe we saw last year with FTX and everything else, all these centralized entities going down. The phrase that always springs to mind for me is blocks are still being added to the blockchain. And that for me is really important. The likes of Bitcoin, Ethereum, all these other projects, they're ticking along. They're still doing what's expected of them. And for me, that always brings me hope, because it's everything else that's being kind of ironed out, and it will get ironed out. And this is a sort of phase of pain that we need to go through in order to end up with a cleaner and more regulated industry. And that's, you just got to put up with it. So although it's painful, I think in the long term, it's a necessary pain. It's something that we have to go through. And another thing that kind of gives me cheer as well is the fact that, this news about Binance and Coinbase being targeted by the SEC, this was front page stuff. Everyone was reporting on it. And it's because it's easy to forget that crypto is still a very small industry by any other standards, because we spend all our waking hours immersed in it. But it is a small industry, but people are taking notice. This is something that's being discussed. Okay, perhaps you might say the wrong people are taking notice. We don't want Gary Gensler and his lot to be taking notice, but they are. But people, as Rob pointed out as well, people in Congress are taking notice, and regulators and politicians in other parts of the world are taking more and more notice of the industry as well. It's not the backwater that it once was, and I think we're poised at this really, really interesting point where we're the industry as a whole is becoming more and more mainstream, but it's kind of got to shrug off these last few shackles before to bloom. So I think we're on the, in the next few years, we're going to be on the precipice of something really big, the explosion of the industry globally. And I think that's really exciting. So you've got to have a kind of long-term view in that respect. So yeah, short-term pain, long-term gain.
Yeah, I mean, it seems reasonable, right? That's why we're all here. We wouldn't be here, I imagine, if we weren't bullish long term on crypto. It's like it's like who do you think is long term bullish? The people who are making a video on it every single day, or the people that are not? So yeah, I think it's always a good reminder that look, we're here long term because we believe in the asset class, right? Doesn't mean that there's not going to be short term pain. It's kind of like the .com crash, I mean. There was pain there for 2.5 years before it came out of it. And I mean, and I've said this before, 2.5 years from April of 2021, which was arguably the main peak, that's this October, you know? So
Mm.
I think there's some reason to think that, yeah, like, things might get a little bit worse for a little bit, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to come out of it and look back in 10 years and it's probably going to appear obvious, I think, like, oh, like that was a painful part to go through, but we had to go through it, and now we're better off for it. So let's go through some questions. If you guys have any questions, make sure you ask them. I think we actually got a lot of questions, and I just need to scroll back up. Someone asked, "What do you think the price of Bitcoin is going to be at the next halving?" So I actually think we already answered this question a few months ago. I think Rob, I think you asked. I mean, I think my answer was like just 28K. I think is what I said back then. I don't know if you guys have. I mean, the price prediction stuff is it's sort of a losing battle, right? Because like more than likely you're not going to be right, like more than likely. So putting out price predictions tends to not be the best thing. But if you guys want to, if you have anything to add, I'll let you.
I will just, I can't give you a prediction, but I can say that, like, we did a video a little bit ago. We took a look at the cycles and where we are. I guess, like my reset years are 2023, 2019, and 2015. I took a look at just where we were in 2019 for this time and it was on June 2nd. And June 2nd, 2019, Bitcoin was 8,679. And people thought that it was going to go to below 5,000. It didn't. And now on June 2nd, 2023, we're at 27,107. So if you take a look at that, and then even like when I took a look at Ethereum was around 250 on June 2nd, 2019, and now it's whatever it is right now. So like I just kind of see like we're way ahead of the curve. And of course, during the Bitcoin halving, I think weren't we right around 10, 12K, somewhere around there. And then towards the end of the year, we went all the way up past the all-time high. So
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going to be, but I'm thinking that it's going to be higher than where we were at if we take a look at 2019, 2023, and 2024.
Well, it's interesting because they actually round tripped, and like Ethereum and Bitcoin, they were at pretty high levels in June of 2019. Then they went down a lot, and then they popped right back up before the halving. So it was like, at the end of the day, I mean, what happened? Many altcoins bled back to Bitcoin, back to Ethereum, and then Bitcoin and Ethereum were among the first to recover out of it, I think is the is something. But yeah.
I don't.
Those are just details though, right? Someone asked, what do you think's the next narrative for bringing new people to the space? I'll say QE. That's what I'll say.
Liquidity, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it really could be GameFi. I think especially if the narrative with Asia plays out and we see adoption there increase, Hong Kong and onwards and through China and obviously as I think I've said before, anecdotally I've heard so much evidence that people in Asia are crazy for crypto, and they're also crazy about gaming. So I think GameFi could be a big driver of future adoption. So definitely one to watch, I think.
Yeah. GameFi, and then as this plays out, any kind of regulatory clarity we get, that could be a nice one. But of course, it's always comes back down to how much money can America print, and we'll see how that works out.
Someone says every halving gains a zero. I guess with reference to Bitcoin's price. Historically, that has been true, I believe. Let's see. And I guess there's a good chance that it could be, I mean, at least gaining another digit, right? Because back in the 2020 halving, we were 4-digit Bitcoin, right? Or 8,000, 9,000. So there's a good chance that this halving will be 5-digit, above 10, 10K or above, right? I think there's a high likelihood that we'll be above 10K for the next halving. So kind of add the digit each cycle, I guess.
And
Um,
then maybe a 6 digit on the all-time highs then
I mean, that's
for
possible.
2025.
I mean,
It's
if it's possible, if we can go, I mean, what did we do last cycle? 25, or we went up like 25x or so from like 3K to 70K or something. Um,
Mm.
yeah,
wow, you look, yeah, your cycles. I stole some data from your site again, and your cycles are, you have like 4 cycles, and the way that you do it, I just look at it a little differently. But yeah, we went from, I mean, there's like the diminishing returns, right? So like I
right.
think it was your second cycle, I think it went up like 500, like
500x.
500x.
Yeah,
And then your third cycle, it went
100x.
up 100x. And then your fourth cycle went up 20x,
Yeah, it was 25. I think it's like 25.
right?
Yeah,
So we're looking at diminishing returns, first of all.
right.
So, I mean, if we take a look at that, I mean, that's a I mean, you're not looking at too much.
Yeah,
But
but
still, even 100x, I mean, excuse me, even 100, a 6 digit Bitcoin's pretty good.
yeah, I would also there's this other idea that I've been thinking about too, because what happened with the Nasdaq. If we were to follow that comparison out, if you want to call it its next cycle, right? Like it went up,
Yeah.
and then what brought it back down in 2008? It was the housing market turned over. So
Mm.
I could see a scenario where we go up, after the halving, and we could get close to the prior all-time highs, and then maybe the housing market comes down, right? I mean, we talked before about the housing market. I don't know when it's going to come down. I mean, it's more resilient than normal, but then I think I could see the like a macro higher low, and then if you look at the Nasdaq, it just sort of slowly built up over the next several years, and then once we got back to or once we got to QE, I mean, it just like it went on a completely new trajectory. But it took a long. It's sort of like the growing pains process. I think that's where we are now. Like I think we're just in the growing, these growing pains, and it's sort of like our where the crypto industry is sort of coming to to be a more serious asset class, but it's not an easy path to get there.
That's true.
Um,
Not easy to invest.
Yeah. So another person asked, what's your view of well, they say the U.S. economy, but in general, let's just talk about your local economy. So what's your views of your local economy over the next 6 to 12 months? Because I mean, look, I mean, there's asset prices, which are one thing, and we all, I mean, it's easy to feel bad when the market is down, but the economy has been resilient, right? I mean, it has been. I mean, you go to a restaurant, you go to movies, like it's not.
Yeah.
What are you seeing where you are, and what's your
I
view
want
for
to
the
hear
next half
from I
year?
want to hear from a guy because he lives in 2 places. He lives in Dubai and sometimes Portugal and sometimes UK. So this will be interesting.
I'll give you, my take on a whole number of economies. Well, where I'm based in Dubai, I mean, yeah, that seems to be going great guns. I mean, it's always kind of difficult to tell because news there is not as quite as easy to come by. But yeah, I mean, it's thriving over there, because more and more people are seeing it as attracting many in the crypto, attracting many others, many people from many other industries as well, and all across the world. So Dubai is doing just fine from what I can see. Not such a rosy picture back here in the UK. Inflation is still high. I think it's below 10% now. But the cost of living, thank goodness,
Yeah.
the things like the cost of living crisis getting talked about here a lot. We had that bond market blow up last year. I think that the effects from that are still being felt. The housing market in the UK, house prices are down, which doesn't happen very often. They've just pulled a whole load of mortgage products off the market. I think the Bank of England either has just raised or is due to raise again. So it's tough. It's tough here in Britain, and I think it probably will be for a while. I can't remember whether they said we're technically in. I think we dipped into a recession, but certainly this economy, I think, has been the worst performing of all the G7 countries in the wake of COVID. So yeah, it's a tale of two different ones, really.
There's a lot of people in the chat are saying that the eurozone entered into a recession, and if you Google it, there's a lot of headlines saying the eurozone slips into a recession just an hour ago. So maybe
Yeah.
that's what they're referring to. I mean, it sort of seems like an inevitable outcome at this point, right? Like things. I think that the bigger question, I guess, is it a mild recession or is it a more severe recession? I think that's the bigger question that we have to ask ourselves. So, I mean, I think there's no denying the fact that like things are slowing down. It's just that at what rate are they going to, or how far will they go before they swing back in the other direction? So, I mean, recently there's been some central banks have been continuing to raise rates, right? I mean, I think Guy just mentioned a couple of them recently, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I guess it just depends on how long it takes for them to shift back the other way. Um, let's see if we can get. We still have a few more minutes because looks like we got through some of the questions.
Hey, there's a good one. They said, when's the best time to buy Bitcoin? Wait till October. I would recommend to take a look at the ROI month over month. September is the worst month, usually statistically, for crypto and digital assets, and also the traditional markets. September. Just take a look at that one, and it's if you want to find some deals, I think it's around that time. Historically, not for sure.
Yeah, I think the last 6 Septembers have been red for Bitcoin. The last six,
Yeah,
maybe.
right.
Hey, lucky number 7, Rob. I don't know. I mean, we're coming up on number 7 here, so we'll see if it's different this time. But you're right. September is also pretty bad for equities as well. It's one of the few
Right.
months where equities really almost not every year, but most years they don't do well in September. That's why we say wake me up when September ends, right? Because there's nothing good going on in September. Um, all right, here's a question. Sort of we've talked about this before a little bit, but it's kind of like kind of the elephant in the room, right? People talk about a Fed pivot, right? We want to see the Fed pivot. We want to go back to QE, but someone says, well, history shows, and they're right, that when you get a cut, when you get QE, or when you get interest rate cuts, that's normally when a major correction is actually happening, right? Because I mean, it makes sense, right? It would take a major correction for the Fed to cut, and when the Fed cuts, it doesn't immediately solve every single problem in the world, right? It's like when you have high inflation, they can raise rates, but it's still going to take a year for inflation to come back down. So just because they're cutting doesn't mean the market responds immediately. What's your view about that? I mean, I think that's the biggest issue that I think a lot of a lot of investors are looking at, because when you look at inverted yield curves, it's upon the uninversion that things are at their worst point. Do we think that it's the same this time? Do we have reason to believe it's going to be different this time? What's your view on this? Because at the end of the day, the uninversion still hasn't happened. Presumably, it has to happen at some point.
Yeah, I will answer this live when I get to London. I gotta go though. My Uber driver's here. So thank you guys for the show. And I gotta get out of here.
All right, guy, make him answer it live.
See ya. Bye.
See ya. Guy,
See you in London.
Did you have anything on that?
Yeah, I think. I mean, yeah, we've discussed it before, haven't we? But every Fed press conference for the last few months, Jerome has come out and he's been determined. He said, this is our plan. We're gonna stick to the plan. We want to get inflation down to 2%. So I think they've got rates probably where they want them now, and I would imagine that they will hold them there for as long as is needed. But of course, as you say, their hand might be forced. They might be forced to pivot by something happening. By the economy tanking, whether that's a recession, whether that's a crisis in the commercial real estate markets, whether that's a fall in the housing market, or whatever it is. Whatever it could be, or some black swan we don't yet know about or haven't considered, which is a definite possibility. Then yeah, I think they will. What's that?
AI taking over the world or something.
Yeah.
The singularity.
Maybe our AI masters will
I think you went out. I'm not hearing anything.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, now you're back. You're
Did
back
I
now.
cut out there a
Yeah,
bit?
you're back now.
All right. So,
The
yeah,
last thing,
sorry,
the last
bad
thing we
connection.
heard, it's kind of funny because the last thing you said before you cut out was our AI masters, and then that was it. It's starting.
And in that cut, I was replaced by
Yeah.
by an AI. Yeah, it's absolutely seamless. Yeah, maybe our AI masters will decide to cut in a few months' time. They'll decide that that's what we deserve. But yeah, I think we can expect to see the status quo kind of maintained for a while yet.
I think the last thing that I want to mention before we head out is someone mentioned your Coin Bureau live event, your conference that's coming up this weekend. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you said that you've already tickets are sold out. But if you could provide just an update on that, or maybe I'm guessing you guys are going to be posting some of it online at some point too.
We are going to be live streaming it. Yeah, it's going to be live streamed on Coin Bureau Clips. So it kicks off at 10 a.m. UK time, and it will be live streamed through till 6 p.m. So yeah, anyone who wants to watch it live with their feet up at home, or who wants to just drop in for a particular bit, then yeah, Coin Bureau Clips will be the place to go. I think the schedule is up on the website live.coinbureau.com. So if there's a particular discussion or panel or whatever that people want to tune in for, that should be up there. So yeah, tickets have been sold out for a couple of weeks, but yeah, we will be live streaming it for those who can't make it.
And that's Saturday, right?
Saturday, yeah, 2 days time.
All right, guys. Saturday, Coin Bureau Clips channel. I believe I linked that down in the description below. So if you wanna join in on that, you'll be able to see what's going on at the conference. I imagine you'll be able to hear Guy talk at the conference. And so make sure you guys check it out. Rob from Digital Asset News, he was just here a few minutes ago. He will also be at the conference. So yeah, so make sure you guys check it out, and then also just subscribe to those channels regardless, because we do NFA live there every week. I believe next week it'll be on Rob's channel. But hey, pleasure to have you here, Guy. And I guess we should sign off. And good luck at the conference. I hope it goes well.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having us, and yeah, see you next week.